He has launched the campaign to try and counter the extremists.
Now speaking out to denounce terror and extremism.
30,000 people formed a human chain in the south this afternoon in the name of peace.
We're asking if religious intolerance is on the rise.
We believe that religious freedom is a fundamental human right.
Giving a message that Islam is a religion of peace.
We must all endeavor to spread love and a sense of community.
In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful, may the peace and blessings of Almighty God be upon you. Welcome to this, the 19th episode of Press Point. Today, we're reflecting and we're discussing the recent incidents of terrorism and extremism which have shaken the world. In particular, the recent incidents of the killings of 3 innocent men and the hostage-taking of a 4th. Particularly, we're looking at the situation regarding IS, the Islamic State, and the establishment of caliphate, or an apparent caliphate in the Middle East. And we're asking ourselves, what is the true Islamic teaching with regards to youth and jihad? And also, what's the true Islamic teaching with regards to Islamic states and also the establishment of caliphate? As ever, I'm joined by my beloved brother Farooq Mahmood in the studio.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. Thank you very much indeed, Jonathan. Yes, as you mentioned already, we are discussing a very important topical issue, which is about extremism. Now it's taken a different kind of turn altogether. Now people are being slaughtered from the West, of course, and videos are being broadcast around the world. What is happening? What do you think? You share with us. You contribute with us, and we contribute with the worldwide empty audience. This is a show which is all about you. And what do you think about this extremism, the menace of extremism with ISIS and similar organizations in the world? What do you think about the true caliphate? What really proves a caliphate, or khilafat, the better word, it to be true, and what are the signs of true khilafat? And then why are the youth from this country and elsewhere being radicalized? What's wrong with them? What's happening? So let's explore all these problems. You can either email using to presspoint@mt.tv, or you can send us tweets using the hashtag presspointmta. And please do use the hashtag PressPointMTA. Our MTA or PressPoint team will be sending out tweets regularly to keep you in the show.
So, Brother Farooq, we have 2 very special guests with us in the studio. On my immediate left, we have Mr. Adam Walker, who is the head of, or is a member of the UK British Press Desk for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in the UK. You're most welcome, and Assalamu alaikum to Brother Adam.
Wa alaikum assalam wa barakatuh.
And we also have Brother Abdul Qudus Arif, who is a special guest for us today. He is a missionary for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, and he is also a member of the International Publications Department for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community worldwide. So, Assalamu alaikum to Brother Qudus as well.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. We have some guests with us online as well, who will be joining us via Skype soon. But before we go to the guests, the first part of today's show is looking at the issue of the Islamic State and Caliphate. As is well known, over recent months, an apparent Islamic State has been established by the organization known as IS. This is not an isolated incident. We also have an apparent Caliphate in northern Nigeria. We also have terrorist organizations growing and spreading across the world, whether it be in Indonesia, Malaysia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Somalia, Sudan, in countries all the way across the world. So in today's studio, we want to make sense of this growth of extremism, but also to frame it in light of the apparent rise of what is known or is being claimed to be an Islamic State, and also this issue of caliphate. What is caliphate? And is caliphate a violent political concept, or does it have deeper, more spiritual roots? So let's start this discussion with some in-depth analysis. So Brother Farooq, as usual, you've done some excellent research, and we'd love to hear about it.
Thank you very much. Research done by the people in the background, as well as some bit from me as well, very humbly. We have on, as you can see on my screen, perhaps you can, this is of course very sad. People are being killed regularly. Another gentleman called Alan Henning, who's being captured, he's in custody of the people called IS now. We're called ISIS, ISIL, IS, Daesh, whatever they're called, whatever they are. Whatever they're doing is not right, which is more important. This person, of course, before he got captured, he's holding a young toddler, perhaps, and of course, all smiles, this picture. And he was there to serve people over there in an aid mission, and he's captured in the name of Islam. That's a story on BBC, by the way. Then we have James Foley, who got killed recently, and the picture of two men from the UK. Both in this picture are from Cardiff, a city in Wales, the largest city of Wales. Unfortunately, the terrorism has roots almost everywhere now, spreading to the west as well. And then a quick one, it's a slightly different dimension to it. New York Times gives a story. Some while back, the story was actually broken. It was about the private donors' funds add wild card to war in Syria. This picture actually is I think, interesting, but very sad indeed, and you can tell why it's grown so much. It's a sign outside a Kuwait city, in city Kuwait, directing donors to a house used by somebody to raise funds for terrorist organizations in Syria to oust the government there. And I think we've heard this from the head of the Muslim community quite regularly about not to let it happen. And we've reached a stage now where the whole world is clamoring and crying, what's happening? It was told to you beforehand, but nobody really seemed to have paid heed. So I think that should be, there's one more thing perhaps before we go on, is a story recently where the world leaders have sort of united to defeat ISIS. They use the word jihadists, warriors, whatever they are, from 24 countries. Now, the world will have concerns because of the previous wars, for example. There are a lot of people, skeptics in the West, who think those wars were not well planned or whatever, the outcomes or the objectives weren't very clear. So therefore, people still are hoping and praying that whatever happens, happens with pure intentions rather than anything as a hidden agenda in the background.
Yes, very true. It's a very complicated issue, it seems, but one thing is for sure, there are a group of men or a group of people who have claimed to establish an Islamic State, and they're doing so in the name of Islam, and while looking to pursue this endeavour, they're killing an awful lot of people. Thousands, in fact, perhaps even hundreds of thousands of people are dying in a conflict. So it's very shocking and apparently very barbaric from a lot of the video footage that's been covered. So before we start the discussion, let's look at a video just so that we can properly understand what it is that we talk about when the Islamic State, as they call themselves, and these other terrorist organizations, when they talk of themselves. What is this concept? So let's have a look at this video now.
For the past few months, the name ISIS has been heard across the media, with the name of Islam again thrown into a negative light. Led by its self-declared Khalifa or Caliph, the group is fighting for a so-called Islamic State across central and northern Iraq, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. ISIS now controls or can operate with impunity in a great stretch of territory in western Iraq and eastern Syria. While its exact size is unclear, the group is thought to include thousands of fighters, including many youth who have been born and raised in the West. Recently, the group have attracted the attention of the media with another horrific killing of David Haines, a British aid worker. They claim to have carried out their atrocities in the name of Islam and declared their captured land as an Islamic State. This has once again questioned the teachings of Islam and tarnished its image, as for the majority of the 1.6 billion Muslims in the world believe Islam to be a religion of peace and reconciliation. The international community has widely condemned the actions of ISIS, and plans are being made to tackle this threat. David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, has stated regarding ISIS,
"They are killing and slaughtering thousands of people, Muslims, Christians, minorities across Iraq and Syria. They boast of their brutality. They claim to do this in the name of Islam. That is nonsense. Islam is a religion of peace. They are not Muslims, they are monsters."
The head of the Ahmadiyya community, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, was quoted in an online paper saying, "The actions and statements of ISIS and other extremists who pretend to represent Islam, whilst all the while spreading hatred and violence, run entirely contrary to the peaceful teachings of Islam. If some of the local people are unhappy and feel the Iraqi government has been unjust and cruel, it still does not justify any form of terrorism or extremism in response. Islam does not permit you to respond to cruelty with further cruelty. All cruelty is wrong and to be condemned." He further mentioned, "The Muslim leaders and so-called clerics are not righteous or God-fearing, and as a result, those under their influence are being entirely misguided. The clerics are pushing young people who know no better towards evil and cruelty by falsely claiming it will lead them towards God."
if I can come to Brother Qudus, we've heard about this concept of the Islamic State. We've heard about the concept of Caliphate. What sort of an impact do you feel this has had on the wider world, not just Muslims, but also people when they're watching? We've just seen David Haynes on the screen, and the reality is that just a few moments after the footage that was showed there, then that innocent man was killed. What sort of an impact is this having on people's, not only their views of Islam, but also their feelings about the world and also about humanity to some extent? What sort of an impact is this having?
Thank you, Jonathan. I think most importantly, Islam's been highlighted again. Again, not in a positive light, a very negative light. And you keep hearing, especially when these so-called terrorists, if they're calling their state an Islamic state, so people pose the question that these are the teachings of Islam. And unfortunately, you know, many people who even study it, even for a bit, they'll realize that it's not Islamic. And unfortunately, it's been portrayed in the media to be an Islamic practice, and it's not. And as the VT also showed, you know, David Cameron saying that this is very un-Islamic principles, practices. And yesterday I was listening on the radio as well, Ken Livingstone, who was the former mayor of London as well. He was saying that, he was giving examples of the Prophet of Islam, saying that nowhere in his life would he find such practices. So it's, like I said before, it's not Islamic, and it's nothing to do with Islam. No teachings actually, you know, go for Islam. And of course, it's a humanitarian issue. It's a concern for humanity itself, that an innocent man is being killed. As the Quran says that killing one innocent man is akin to the killing of the whole of humanity. And so, you know, naturally, any person who has an iota of compassion for humanity itself will realize that this is incorrect and something which is barbaric.
So immediately from the beginning we can understand that this is actually contrary to Islam, and I think we'll come back and examine this in more detail as well. But just before we do that, Brother Farooq, I think you've also looked to sense how people were responding to this online. What's the online community? How have they responded to this?
Yes, online community, of course, is filled. Of course, you are more active on Twitter, of course. Online community has been very vocal about this. But at the moment, let's take a look at what's happening and what really is the scale of their plans, of course. And we believe it's only plans. Will never come to fruition from their point of view. But looking at, probably you can see my screen, see the actual map they've published. It's in Arabic language, of course. This map is pretty interesting, almost makes you laugh. The plan is to grow towards east as well as towards west. They're at the moment somewhere there, Iraq and Syria. And they want to go eastwards all the way up to Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India. And that'll be called Khorasan. They want to go towards west, all the way up to Andalus, that is Spain. They want to go to Balkan states, Uruba. They want to go to the whole of Middle East, have it occupied, including Hijaz, which is Saudi Arabia. And almost half of Africa will be under their territory. That's a 5-year plan until 2019. That's what they have published, and some people have become scared of this, of course, whatever the reason being. But of course, it is a very strong way to communicate their plans, and people have been understandably concerned to see that. Then we've got something I think was very sensible, only one sensible news that I've picked up. Sorry about that. This news is by the France 24, and they've said French government to use Arabic Daesh for Islamic State group. Now Daesh is an acronym, and Arabic language hasn't got many acronyms, by the way. And Daesh stands for Ad-Dawat al-Islamiyya al-Iraq al-Sham. So probably, and they what they've said is, I think, very sensible. They say that the French government has come up with an answer to a point of persistent journalistic confusion. How exactly does one refer to the Islamic State organization brutally carving out a self-declared caliphate in Syria and northern Iraq? So I think very sensible not to use the words of Islamic State, which confuses people as to what Islamic State really means. It's coming from non-Muslims, French people, by the way. I think something to be appreciated and encouraged. Then, for the time being, at the end, Lord Tariq Ahmad, again, social media, he says all communities appalled by murder of David Haynes and Muslims across Britain have been clear ISIS and their barbarity has no place in Islam.
So we've seen a map of apparently the plan of Islamic State spread. To Mr. Walker on my immediate left, I think that people are, the video footage that we're seeing masses of Shia Muslims being shot and assassinated because they refuse to declare their allegiance to the Islamic State. We're seeing children tragically holding up the heads of people who've been killed. We're seeing 3 journalists and aid workers who've been physically murdered, beheaded. Yet we're hearing the name Islamic State attached to these actions. Is this an Islamic State, would you say?
I mean, it's patently neither Islamic nor is it a state in any shape or form. They neither have the theological nor the territorial ability to claim either. The reality is that they use fear, which is, I mean, the core of what terrorism is, to use fear to harm others and to control others or to coerce others into doing what you want in order to control masses of people. And really they're using the people, they're using this fear as a political vehicle to achieve their political ends, which usually has money and power very much at the top of the list. So, in a direct answer, the answer is no, they're not.
If I could be provocative and say, I guess their perspective, they would answer that and say, well, we're Islamically based. We're justifying what we do using the Quran, the Holy Quran of God. We're looking for hadith, the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, and that in fact this sort of violence, this sort of terror, it's really Islamic, they feel. So they've got writings of the kalama of God declaring their faith. And so for them, they really feel this is an Islamic concept and they're looking to root it in Islam. Are they misunderstanding Islam, or what's the problem there?
I would go even further than saying that they're misunderstanding Islam. So they're manipulating Islam specifically for this political goal, this political end. I mean, if we look throughout history, we find that all of the major religions of the world, and today, Buddhism with regards to the Rohingya, medieval Christian expansion, Hindu extremist groups, we find that in all religions, despite the fact that they are peaceful religions, despite the fact that the majority of the people who follow those religions are themselves peaceful and follow a peaceful teaching, we do have these people that manipulate religion. And at the heart of it, as mentioned, is a power struggle. And the only clearest answer that we can give to anyone who claims that this kind of extremism, this radical terrorist manipulation of Islam is un-Islamic, is to say that the majority of the world simply rejects these people. The majority of the world rejects the doctrines, just as the majority of Christians would reject Christian extremism or Hindus Hindu extremism.
Right. Okay.
And in terms of the example of the Prophet Muhammad, he simply, there's no remnants of his example in what they do.
So this is something, I mean, we have the example to some extent, as Brother Adam has mentioned, that there is a concept of Islam, and if it's being manipulated, then for the Qudus, what is the true Islamic example of statehood and of governance? And if they aren't doing it correctly in their territory or whichever area they've captured, then what do we know from the history of Islam with regards to the Islamic State? Was it different to this?
Absolutely. I think as a state, regardless of being Islamic or un-Islamic, I think, as Adam said as well, that it has to be based upon complete justice. And you find that what these people are doing, it's completely unjust and unjust compared to what we see in the example of the Prophet of Islam 14 centuries ago and his khulafa, his rightly guided caliphs, who are his true successors. They think that just by having a state and declaring it as an Islamic state, just by name, automatically assumes that they're following the Sharia law. It's not the case. They've misinterpreted it completely. On one hand, they say that they're following the Prophet's example. He's been declared as a mercy for mankind in the Quran. What they're doing, is it compassion? Is it merciful to humanity itself? Of course not. You're killing innocent souls, killing innocent lives, children, women, etc. There's no compassion in that at all. I mean, nature in itself speaks against it. And you find that this is why we're sitting here today, because we feel so strongly against it. And the world alike feels so strongly against it. The Holy Prophet ﷺ was a mercy, a complete mercy. And to associate anything which is uncompassionate towards him and his religion It's the greatest injustice.
Contradictory in a sense.
Absolutely, biggest contradiction.
So what's happening then, Mr. Quddus? Because from the videos we're seeing Chechnyan people coming to fight with ISIS. We're seeing Indonesians. We're seeing Somalians. We're seeing people from all over, and then also, of course, people from within Iraq and also from within Syria. So these are people who are seeking what they consider to be an Islamic State, and they are somehow attaching themselves to it. So what's going wrong? Why are they believing that this is the Islamic State? What's the pull for them?
Jonathan, it's just a lack of leadership. That's what comes down to it. That's the crux of the argument. They do not have, unfortunately in Islam, apart from the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, they don't have a leader who they can look up to, who can spiritually guide them. Just by self-declaring yourself as a caliph doesn't make you a spiritual leader who's divinely guided. And it is only divine, that quench that people want. The thing is, Islam teaches unity in everything. It's based on the unity of God. And what it wants is for unity to be established within the ummah as well, in its ummah. And to establish that unity, you need one person who is a khalifa or who's an imam, or just one. And just by declaring him as someone who's just a khalifa by name, that's what they want. And you find that so many from the West. I think I was reading up, 31,000 people they have an army of, and out of that 12,000 people have gone from different countries to pledge allegiance with this self-claimed khalifa.
And also very young people as well, teenagers.
That's the most worrying thing, that it is those infertile minds that have been affected the most. They don't, because they're easily persuaded to do certain actions. And unfortunately, some mosques, some clerics are not preaching the right teachings of Islam and preaching hatred. So what happens is that these infertile minds take it on board, and they're forced to so-called go over and do jihad in the name of their religion.
Well, we've mentioned Western countries. So we actually have a Skype guest who's from the US, who Brother Farooq's going to talk to us now. I think it'd be particularly interesting to understand many of these people, as you've mentioned, are coming from the Western nations. They're coming from Britain, they're coming from the US, they're coming from Canada. What is the concept of Islam for these Muslims within these countries, and why are they being pulled over there? So let's see what our Skype guest.
Very timely sort of plan to bring in the president of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Youth Organization in America, Mr. Bilal Rana. Can you hear me, Mr. Rana? I'm not sure if you can hear me because I can't hear you back.
It's choppy a little bit. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Mr. Rana, first of all, welcome on the show. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. For you, it's the morning, isn't it, apparently?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the problem right now. Of course, the youth from different parts of the world, including your dear country, US, you've got people going to help that organization called IS. How is the American public perceiving this, what the lunatics are doing elsewhere? And based on the perception of people, as a result, how is it being tackled by the government in America?
I think I caught the second half of your question, the perception of what's happening. Obviously, ISIS is taking the US media by storm, and it's a particularly painful, very agonizing time for Muslim youth in this country. The public opinion of Muslims was already very low, but now it's reached even lower than right after 9/11. And there is pressure from public opinion in wanting to move the government towards taking military action, which is very troublesome and painful for Muslims in this country.
So what is the government doing to tackle the problem? Of course, it is not, and people understand it's not the problem in Islam, it's a problem with some people. Does the government appreciate that? And how does the government and other people of authority explain that to the people who are youngsters or general public in America?
I'm not sure if it's so much a government responsibility as it is a media responsibility. The government is trying to, in some countries here in the West, including Canada, take away passports from people that they feel are traveling to the Middle East to participate in this type of work and terrorism. But it's really the obligation and responsibility of the media to highlight and draw attention not just to the suffering that US and Caucasian and American and Christian journalists are suffering at the hands of ISIS, but also the pain and misery and death on the side of the Muslims. And it's important, I think, to highlight that, because that tells us that it's not really about Islam. Because if it were really about Islam and about Muslims, then you wouldn't be killing Muslims. And the casualties on the Islamic side of the equation are far more. So this is important not just to humanize Muslims, but also to teach and remind the American that we are as much at odds with this strain, this particularly grisly strain of Islam, as they are.
Okay, so we're going to firstly apologise to Mr. Rana for the slight poor line, and we'll be back with you very soon. But I think we've got a number of key points there which are really important and worth discussing. We'll have a quick look at the online community, just to bring that in, because I know we've got a lot of guests and viewers at home who are engaging with this. So Brother Farooq, if you want to, what have we been getting online?
Can I get one tweet for the time being?
Yes, please.
By Shermeen B, I think a very succinct tweet says, minor yet profound point by Hazur. Khilafat is bestowed, not snatched. So I think next part will be about caliphate or khilafat. I think khilafat is again a better word. Caliphate has got different connotations. Yes. But the Islamic leadership, I think, is a better word in translation for khilafat. Yeah. So khilafat is bestowed, not snatched. And I think probably it's a good starting point for the next discussion point. What do you think?
Yes, most definitely. I mean, Mr. Kadus, I know you're waiting to come in with a point, but I want to quickly go to Mr. Walker, if I may. Just if you can just introduce us to this concept, because it may not be a concept which all of our viewers are familiar with. Those who are Muslim will probably have a good understanding of Khilafat and Caliphate, but what is, in particular, what is Khilafat or Caliphate? Is there a difference between the two terms? And which is the best Islamic understanding of true Khilafat? A brief answer, if you may. I know it's a very, very in-depth topic.
I mean, in answer to the first question, I think traditionally speaking, there was in the modern era misuse of the word caliphate by a group of Orientalists, but I think that's something that's perhaps past now, and they generally have a similar meaning. So caliphate or khilafa in Arabic literally means successorship, or someone who is or an institution which represents something that comes before. So in Islam, with the Prophet ﷺ, we believe that he obviously was someone who had brought spiritual change to all that he had touched, which had spread throughout the world. And upon his passing, that successorship, that spirituality, the khulafa that came, the caliphs, they represented the spiritual lineage of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that's really what khilafah is there. It's often suggested that khilafah is political in nature, but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself wasn't political. So therefore you have to follow suit with what you're representing. So even though at times some of the caliphs that came after were placed into situations where they had to take certain political decisions, that in itself doesn't define what caliphate is. Because without political worldly power, a caliphate can exist. But without spirituality, it simply can't exist.
Excellent. Okay, very good. So building on this structure then, Mr. Kadus, if I may then, so we've heard from Mr. Walker that it's a largely spiritual concept, it's a concept of successorship. Connecting it with the tweet, can Khilafat be snatched or claimed by power and by military might, or is it something which has a direct relationship with God?
I think where the Quran mentions God bestowing this great bounty upon the believers, the verb that's used is that God gives it. It's a promise from God, and no might, no power apart from God's mighty and omnipotent power can bestow that. So anyone can try. Any worldly governments can try and come together, knock together, and yes, they can name themselves Khalifa by name alone, but that spiritual side, that's only divinely given. As Adam Saab mentioned a point that the Holy Prophet ﷺ, he was basically forced to become a policymaker. When he was migrated to Medina, the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims and the pagans, they all came to the Prophet and said that because you're the most wise amongst us, so you should be our governor. And you find that this was continued with his rightly guided Khulafa as well, that people came to the Khulafa and asked for their political guidance. But that didn't make them politically motivated individuals, as Adam Sab said.
So if I may push you on this, and maybe a difficult answer to give, but taking what you've given us in terms of definitions, have we seen a true caliphate established as a result of the military conflict in Syria and Iraq? In particular, there's Mr. al-Baghdadi, who's declared himself to be a Khalifa. According to the Islamic guidance you've given, is this true caliphate?
Of course not. It's not. Like I said, it's something that God bestows to the believers, He promises. But one key aspect that God mentions is that He establishes faith and gives security to the faith through this individual. Now, we have this Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi who claims to be the Khalifa, and people have pledged their allegiance to him. Now, is Islam being established through his hands? Is there security and peace being offered to his so-called followers? Of course not. On the contrary, the Islam that he's posing is an extremist version of Islam. Instead of people coming towards it, everyone's running away from it. You have the entire world's population against this concept, whereas, you know, in the Quran it says that it should be otherwise.
Okay.
Yes. Add one point. You know, just adding to what Qudus had said. The fourth Caliph of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmed, had said in one speech that, and this really is the essence of the difference between this self-proclaimed caliphate and what is a real caliphate. He said that our community has no ambition for territory. Territory is meaningless to us. Our territory are people's hearts. And that's what we want to conquer, and we want to conquer that with love. And I think he very pertinently said, and this is what the battleground is for us right now, he said, we want to win back with love what was lost by the sword. And a lot is being lost by the sword now, but I believe that a lot's being done to win back the hearts of people.
Mr. Walker, if I can build on these 2 points here. I mean, we've heard then that that apparently, or according to very persuasive arguments from both of you, this isn't a true caliphate that we see in the Middle East. And then I've heard you talk of the Ahmadiyya Muslim caliphate now that's been established under the promised Messiah, peace be upon him's guidance. We do know, however, that the Muslim community, as Mr. Arif mentioned, 31,000 or more potentially flocking towards this caliphate, supposed caliphate. It seems like there is a clamour and there is a desire amongst the Muslim community, and they feel that potentially this may actually be the true caliphate that was prophesied by the Holy Prophet. What message would you give those people who are almost ready to give their lives? In fact, they're dying there, and also they're killing other Muslims. What message would you give them in order to deter them from going and laying down their lives and taking the lives of others in response to this claim of caliphate?
I mean, I would say first of all that they need to really contemplate hard as to whether what they're aspiring towards is going to benefit them spiritually. Will they be a better person? Are they already becoming a better person? And I think if they dig deep, they'll realize that they're not. And when they answer that question, what I would persuade, really ask them to think about deeply, is that there might be 30,000 people there, but more than 30,000 of us gathered recently to offer our allegiance to spirituality, to peace, to caliphate. This is what it represents. More than is in Iraq. More than 300,000 had joined online, and millions had watched. So there are, millions of people who feel exactly the same way. They feel that there's a need and there's a void that needs to be filled. But many more are coming here. So it's worth just opening their hearts and looking and seeing what they find.
Okay, so I guess we have then a direct dichotomy between the apparent or the very visible violence of the apparent al-Baghdadi caliphate and the caliphate of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. I think that's where we are now, isn't it then? Mr. Qudus, if you could tell us a little bit more, if this, as his brother Farooq called it, a snatched caliphate, if that isn't true caliphate, then why would you and why would the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, why would they say so strongly that this is true caliphate? What is the claim there? What's the reason for it?
I think the Prophet of Islam gave us a roadmap to Khilafat. And he said that after his own prophethood, there will be a Khilafat until God desires. Then God will take that away. And then there will be tyrannical monarchs until God desires. And he will take that away as well. There will be other monarchs as well who will be worse in nature. and that will be taken away as well until he establishes Khilafat ala min Hajj al-Nubuwwah again, meaning Khilafat on the precepts of prophethood. Now, this so-called Khilafat of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, first of all, we should ask the question that what prophet came and to who is he succeeding? If he's succeeding to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that we've clearly established from before that his actions are clearly contrary to the actions of the Holy Prophet of Islam. So hence, there must be a prophet for the successorship to be there. And we say, as Ahmadi Muslims, that the promised Messiah, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian alayhi salam, he was the prophet who was promised, and afterwards a spiritual succession started, and it's been established for over 100 years. And instead of preaching hatred and violence, it's preaching peace, harmony, reconciliation, and as Adam says, winning hearts, conquering hearts with love.
And also you mentioned about the Holy Quran, but the word peace has come with Khilafat anyway.
Absolutely.
So when if it's everything but peace, how could it be Khilafat anyway? So I think probably that's something more like a leadership of whatever kind, whatever they call it. But here indeed, Hazul mentions about his last Friday's sermon, like a tree, for example, unless the roots can only be proven to be there if there are flowers and fruits of good deeds there, and shady trees of people being attracted. So it's quite the opposite that's happening in other parts of the world, wherever it is. It's east of Syria or west of Iraq. The reality is Khilafat is not contained in one location. It's a universal thing, and that's already in place in the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. As the fifth successor of Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may Allah be his helper, is at the moment the head of the Ahmadiyya community and Khalifa, appointed by the Almighty Allah, who gives peace, not weapons to people.
Yes, and I think we're going to have quite an in-depth look at the kind of influence that this spiritual leadership has on Muslims, not only in terms of the impact of ISIS and that leadership, but also the leadership of the Caliphate or the Khalifa of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. But the Farooq, I think we mentioned also a little bit about how some of the press had noticed the clear distinction between the two concepts of Caliphate, and I think you've managed to find some really interesting stories online.
I think, let me go to that, yes, of course. The BBC Asia Network reporters, Katrin Nai and Atar Ahmed, they actually interviewed some of the young people in the UK. And let me just sort of give a summary rather than going through the whole of thing. There were different kinds of people. One group was saying, yes, they believe Caliphate is needed, Khilafat is needed, but ISIS is not that Khilafat, very sensible view from their point of view. Other group was saying there's no need for Khilafat anyway, the Holy Prophet ﷺ came, he's gone, there's no need for anything after him. Then there's a group that's saying that we are skeptical, we're not sure if this could be the Khilafah, so they're living in a bit of doubt. One group says that perhaps it's the right Khilafat. But I'll bring you to a comment which is very unique to everyone, was from an Ahmadi Muslim with the name Fidaul Haq. What he says is that my view is very different, and I think there are two things that a caliph has to fulfill. He has to bring people closer to God, and he has to unify the mankind. And of course he says the caliph is appointed by God himself, and therefore there's no political side to it. I think a very succinct view in the sense that caliphate is purely spiritual body given by the Almighty Allah himself, and therefore protection is also by him. By the way, quickly, the Ahmadiyya Khilafat, which we believe is a true Khilafat, has been there for 106 years already. So such a long time of existence can never happen in this period of turmoil everywhere in the world. Existence itself clearly means the roots are founded not in this earth, elsewhere.
Okay, very good. I think let's wrap up on part one then, I think, which is, I think, some clear messages, Brother Farooq, have come forwards. We've talked about the Islamic State, we've talked about Caliphate, and I think we understand now that if we're talking about a true Islamic State and a true Caliphate, it's a spiritual concept, and primarily it's based upon spiritual ideals, and it's meant to build spiritual people, and it's meant to attract people spiritually towards it. It certainly isn't meant to kill people who come close to it, and it's certainly not meant to be a political message or political method of domination, oppression, persecution of other minorities. And in fact, very paradoxically, it's not meant to be a tool of killing other Muslims either. So I think this is some really valuable views that we've received from the guests so far. Let's move on to part two now, which is the youth and jihad, because this is obviously one of the main concerns that the media have. They're seeing very young people, many of them in their teens, some of them in their teens, others in their 20s, who are ready to lay down their lives for some of the things that we've talked about earlier. But not only that, we've heard of a very prominent individual, an infamous, notorious individual, nicknamed Jihadi John, who so far has killed 3 innocent people, 2 from the US, James Foley, Stephen Sotlov, and 1 from the UK, David Haynes. And there's the real risk that he's about to kill another person. So essentially beginning to approach a mass murderer in terms of his conduct. He's a young man, he's an apparent Muslim, he believes he's fighting a jihad. So that's what we want to talk about now, I think, and that's what we want to get a better sense of. Brother Farooq, what sort of an insight have you gathered from online media and some of the commentary?
Well, only because time is very short, I've been told in my ears. I think we've established that people are going from this part of the world elsewhere, and certainly they're creating mayhem, and the roots are to be understood. So let's talk to, if we can, one of the students at Ahmadiyya Theology College in London, near London, a place called Hizmeh. If we have him online, my earpiece is playing up, so I hope I can hear him. Nuruddin Khan, can he hear me at all? Nuruddin Saab, Assalamu alaikum.
No.
Jazakallah for being on the show. You are a student of theology in England, of course, studying Ahmadiyya Muslim communities, beliefs and what we stand for. Tell us very quickly, how concerned are you at personal level with what's happening, that people from this part of the world and elsewhere, young people travelling to Syria and Iraq to fight and slaughter people, cut their throats? What's your feeling? Share your concerns.
Is that what's happening here is the youth are being targeted and they're being taught only specific aspects of things like the teachings of Islam. So everything is blown out of perspective. So all this that they're doing is actually reflecting directly on the religion of Islam and on its image. And that's what's damaging the religion of Islam right now.
Succinct, very short answer. Thank you very much. Always is welcome, a short answer. Then one more question. So of course you're studying theology in Jamia Ahmadiyya UK. That's the name in Arabic, which of course is theology, studying what we believe. How is your education helping you? And is it helping you, first of all? If it's helping you, how has it helped in your personal, private life in practical sense?
Foremost, everything that we are taught is through the Quran and through the Hadith. So what we are taught is not just specific aspects, but actually the full image and the true image of Islam, which is actually one of peace and tolerance. So what does that mean? That means that we are taught to not just obey the nation and the rule among us, but also to love it, because this is also part of faith. And our youth, we are not exposed to this radicalization, but what we are exposed to, what we are encouraged to do, is charitable activities, such as leafleting, such as tree planting, blood donations. All these kind of things is what we do as Ahmadi Muslims. And it all boils down to the fact that we follow and we obey the true Khalifa. We have recognized and understood that the Imam of the age is the true person who has been sent by God, and we have followed the system which has followed him, which is the system of Khilafat. And we see that the other Muslims, they do not have this, and that is why they are all dispersed and they have no unity among them.
So just to be clear, you don't believe at all that sword or gun should be picked up for any reason whatsoever?
Well, of course not. That's exactly what we were taught in Jamia.
Okay.
That,
in no circumstances whatsoever?
Of course not.
Okay.
Mr. Nuruddin, can I also ask you a question? You're a young man. You're in what is known as Jamia Ahmadiyya, which is the college, theological college. We hear a lot about madrasas around the world. Madrasas are the kind of the name for the Muslim schools for children, often misused. But you're in, let's say you're in a school, which is an Islamic school. Are your teachers or your peers, are they in any way advocating for you to take up a violent jihad? Or is any of the teaching which you're receiving in any sense advocating that you as a young Muslim has a duty to fly to Syria or to Iraq in order to fight a violent jihad?
100% no. What's happening is that we have been shown the guidance through the Khalifa. We have constant contact with him, and he has shown us, and the Prophet has shown us the true message of Islam, and that is one of peace. That's what Islam means, one of the meanings. And if we were to do such a thing, then we would be going against everything, the very DNA of Islam, which is the meaning peace. So we cannot go to other countries, we cannot fight others, because in that sense we would be just as bad as any other person claiming to be from any terrorist group. And that's not what Islam is all about. Islam is all about showing love, showing peace, showing sympathy to mankind, and showing mercy. So for us to do such a thing would be against our own teachings, against our own DNA, as I would say.
Thank you very much, Brother Nuruddin. May Allah bless you and keep up studying good things and keep practicing them as well. Let's now move on, shall we? He's talked about, of course, the work for mankind being rendered by Ahmadiyya Muslim community's youth, which is universal everywhere in the world, not just the UK, of course. Flood relief, probably you know, Adam Saab, more than I could ever even think of. You've been actively involved with talking to people about this as well recently. Blood donations, when there were flash floods in the UK, people, Ahmadi boys were having they rolled up their sleeves and with their bellies on, they were helping people. Similarly, not just the financial help, but also manpower help is also rendered to various people in society. We're very lucky to have once again the President of American Muslim Community, Ahmadiyya Muslim Community's youth organization in America, Mr. Bilal Rana. I hope the sound is better now. Let's hope, inshallah. Mr. Rana, assalamu alaikum again.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Can you hear me okay?
I do absolutely wonderfully. Thank you very much. Now, a quick question. This community is very, very strange. It does not believe in killing. It just believes in patience and prayer. It helps people, the society in large, wherever they are. And you are in the US. You have a number of youth, I think maybe in thousands, who you are guiding through the right path. This must be very difficult, I mean, the present day and age, to keep people on the right path and keep them peaceful, because we read that Muslims are not peaceful. So how do you control such a big number of youth in America?
Well, I'll say that we've been able to do this, mashallah, in this country since the late 1930s, when we were first established in the U.S., 1939. We have about 3,000 members, Brother Farooq, in the United States, and we actually, as you would think it's very hard, but actually it makes for great press and media for Muslims to come out and do noble acts of goodness, social welfare acts. We've done, and with great success, many food drives all across the country. In fact, last year we attempted and broke a Guinness Book of World Records for feeding the hungry. We've been doing for a number of years a very successful Muslims for Life blood drive campaign. Over the last 3 years, this is our 4th year, we've collected over 33,000 pints of blood. And so I give this message to our youth that the only blood that we shed is a pint of blood to give life, not to take it.
So what's that secret? I mean, the story you're telling me is the same story that Brother Adam will tell us in this country. Why is it so universal? Why is it the common thing? I mean, it hardly ever is the case America is the same as the UK. We don't even have the same words in English. How could you have consistent view of youth in both countries? Brother Adam.
Well, I think at the core of it is that there is a clear line of leadership that exists, which is the caliphate, the khilafah that we talked about before. And what that really aims to do is to instill within children at a very young age that the key to success in, various aspects of life is social engagement, is serving humanity, is getting out into the community, meeting people, helping them, serving them, bettering society. And it has all kinds of positive impacts. On the one hand, it allows people to avoid extremism, because why are you going to become an extremist if your life is dedicated to serving other people? It would go against the very fabric of what you had become, what you'd been conditioned to become through peaceful teachings. The other thing is that it breaks down barriers within society. When the flood relief efforts in the UK had happened, where many areas of the UK were very badly hit, some villages you couldn't enter without going in a boat. They were that bad. Our young members gave up their school holidays, for example, their half term when they were preparing for GCSE exams, or should have been, to actually serve society. And people who had previously held right-wing extremist views against Islam and against foreigners, in fact, were actually saying that these were the views that I used to hold. But having seen you and met you and dealt with you, I've actually changed my views. And you actually had these young people that literally, there are images where they're carrying people through the water, twice their size almost, to try and take them to safety. And that's the real impact that it has. And then as they navigate through their way into adulthood, it really helps them and shapes them to become productive, conscientious members, both in their personal life and within greater society.
So I've got something which is very connected to Mr. Walker's point. It's a common practice within the Ahmadiyya Muslim community that a pledge is given. So it's not only a pledge towards God and his oneness, it's not only a pledge towards Muhammad being the holy prophet of Islam, may the peace and blessings of God be upon him, but it's actually a pledge towards the nation, is it not? It's a pledge towards those young men and those young women who also take the pledge that they will be loyal to their country. And so for British young Muslims, these are Ahmadi young Muslims who are saying that I pledge my obedience, my loyalty to Britain. Yeah, this is essentially the pledge. And I think this is important. So let's take a look at a video of this. And let's keep in mind that while these young men and these young women are pledging this pledge, then tragically there are young men and young women who are pledging to in fact form a new state that will kill people that exist and live within the area of Syria and Iraq, and will also fight a violent jihad to kill any Americans, any British people, any foreigners that intervene in that area. And as we've seen from many of the aid workers and journalists, many innocent people are killed as well. So let's note the difference of the pledge, and when we come back, let's try and analyse why there is such a distinction in terms of the different pledges which are being taken. Let's go to the video now.
I bear witness that there is none worthy of worship except Allah. He is one and has no partner. And I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his servant and messenger. I solemnly pledge that I shall always be ready to sacrifice my life, wealth, time, and honor for the sake of my faith, country, and nation. Likewise, I shall be ready to offer any sacrifice for guarding the institution of Khilafat-e-Ahmadiyya. Moreover, I shall deem it essential to abide by any maruf decision made by Khalifatul Masih. Inshallah.
Mr. R, if I can come to you on this. It's hitting on 2 points which we've talked about already, I think, isn't it? One is they were young men, they were young Muslims, and they were young British Muslims as well. And secondly, that's the Khalifa of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, who's calling those men and declaring that they must pledge their obedience to their country. This is in direct contrast to those British Muslims who are leaving this country to go and fight what they consider to be a violent jihad. So firstly, let's start with the understanding of why are these young men fighting this violent jihad? Could you help us to understand this? What is going on that is prompting some young Muslims, very different to the pledge we've just seen there, to go and fight a very different form of violent jihad overseas? What's the motivation?
I think the motivation behind it is predominantly that they're being taught something which is contrary to Islam. Whereas Islam teaches that, like the pledge also mentioned, that loyalty is an integral part, or loyalty to one's country or nation is an integral part of Islam. They see it otherwise. They see a West versus East, or Islam versus the West. And that's the unfortunate thing. They find these two things contradictory. They find that being a Muslim in today's society, you cannot be Western and be a Muslim at the same time. Whereas Islam is a religion for all times. It's a religion for the entire humanity and mankind. Hence, whatever religion, whatever nation you belong to, whatever place you belong to on the earth, you can practice Islam and still be a loyal citizen to that place.
On this one, can you, sorry to interject, Mr. Arif, can you be patriotic to Britain and be a Muslim?
Absolutely. I mean, like we've been given examples, these young men, I mean, ourselves as well, we belong to the Youth Association itself, the youth organisation. We're British, and we hold that with great passion and pride that we're British, but we're Muslims as well, which is even, and for that, we hold that with pride and passion as well. And we don't find that our Islamic teachings and practices are different to British values, because there aren't. what the British values are what? To make sacrifices and become a better person for society. These are Islamic values as well. There's no contradiction between the two. Whereas these people, unfortunately, they're misguided and they've been taught that no, you cannot be British, you cannot be a nationalist to especially a Western country and be a Muslim at the same time.
Mr. Walker, moving on from taking that point directly, a lot of the people that I think we've seen interviewed on the TV, they say that we need to do this because we cannot practice as Muslims here in the UK. They'll give different reasons for this. If I can suggest some of them, they say there's people eat pork here. They'll say that I go to Oxford Street and I see ladies who aren't wearing full niqab. They say that we can't call the azan in a very public manner. We can't regulate alcohol on the streets, and there's other forms of practices. They say that we simply can't live here. We now need to leave this land and establish an Islamic state elsewhere. That's a youth perspective, arguably, from within the UK. Are they right? Do you agree with them?
Oh, no, I don't agree with them at all. I mean, drinking alcohol or eating pork is certainly something which is forbidden by Islam for various good reasons, but the fact that they exist in the world is not a reason that Islam can't be practiced. The pluralistic values that underpin British society afford any citizen the right to practice their core religious principles. There's nothing that I as a Muslim or anyone that I know that, for example, is a non-Ahmadi Muslim cannot practice in the UK that's found in the Quran or that's found in the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad. May the peace and blessings of God be upon him. And I think that I think that people that go abroad are really looking for answers in the wrong place, and it really goes back to what we were talking about earlier with regards to spirituality. If they misunderstand the nature of Islam, if they misunderstand the nature of jihad.
Let me interject there. We've only got 1 minute. Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Is it possible as a British Muslim to fight a jihad within the UK under the Caliphate of Islam Ahmadiyya, a spiritual jihad? Is that possible?
It's absolutely possible. It's what we do every day of the week. We fight a spiritual jihad in order to make British society better. Anything which runs contrary to enhancing the society runs contrary to our jihad. And that's really what it's all about. And anyone that feels that they can find a better answer elsewhere, they can go elsewhere. But all that they'll find, as we've seen, are groups of people that deny everyone rights, pretty much, except for their own narrow ideology. We say that in a pluralistic society, a pluralistic religion, people can practice freely as they like. The only principle is justice and not infringing upon the rights of others.
Very interesting. So I think for the viewers at home then, according to this definition, our two guests today, perhaps even Farooq Sab, maybe even myself, we are actually jihadis, peaceful jihadis living in Britain. And I think that's an important message for the media. And I think if we understand the teachings of the Holy Prophet of Islam, he said that there are two forms of jihad, the lesser jihad and the greater jihad. And it seems to be like Mr. Walker speaking on behalf of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community youth in the UK, Mr. Ron from the US, they're talking about jihad from the position of a young Muslim, but they're patriots, and they're saying that you can fight a jihad right here, fight your ego, fight your desires, fight your own failings, your own flaws, overcome your own self, and then you're fighting jihad. And then you can build an Islamic state here in the UK under the Caliphate of Islam Ahmadiyya, the successor to the promised Messiah. So very, very different take, in fact diametrically opposed. And I think based on the views given by the guests, the viewers at home can decide which one seems like a more humane jihad, a more peaceful jihad, a more Islamic jihad in reality. And I think the answer is quite clear. Until next time, I think next episode will be the 20th episode of Press Points. It'll be a great pleasure. Please join Farooq Sab and some more special guests to examine more current affairs issues from the Islamic perspective. On behalf of Farooq Sab and the team, I'd like to greatly thank Mr. Qudus Arif and also Mr. Adam Walker, Mr. Nuruddin Khan and Bilal Rana for joining us and enlightening us in light of further deeper knowledge of Islam in modern times. May Allah bless them and may Allah bless you at home. Please join us next time. And until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
The community has launched the campaign to try and counter the extremists.
Now speaking out to denounce terror and extremism.
30,000 people formed a human chain in the south this afternoon in the name of peace.
We're asking if religious intolerance is on the rise.
We believe that religious freedom is a fundamental human right.
Giving a message that Islam is a religion of peace.
We must all endeavor to spread love, and a sense of community.